Pablo. Yeah, some applause.
Thank you. I sent it to you in. Yeah. No, better on yours so I can read my notes.
Yeah.
Hello. Maybe I can start speaking while you plug that in. Mm. Maybe I sit, if you all don't mind. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's so nice to be here. I'm Pablo. Been here quite a few times, and I'm really happy to be surrounded by so many good friends and also new people. So that's, yeah, really exciting. I work as a media artist and designer in various projects in this field of social coordination and post-capitalist economies. But particularly now, I come in representation of the Neighbourhoods team. Yeah, I mean, it's okay, we can continue. We are a project building on top of Holochain, building a social coordination framework for the distributed web. We're a team of around 12 people working in different capacities, a few full-time, most of us part-time. Yeah, so I come in representation of a larger team. Yeah, so what is Neighbourhoods? Generally speaking, Neighbourhoods is these three things. It's modular, customizable groupware, so software for groups. It is a social intelligence layer, more on that later, where we're doing sense making within and across communities. And it is also a bazaar connecting developers and communities. So a bazaar is what we refer to as a marketplace with a social fabric. And these are the three main focuses that we are developing in Neighbourhoods. Still very early on. I was here last year. I showed very, very early stuff. I'm really happy to share that today. Yeah, we have a solid team. We're working. Holochain's been in beta for a few months now, so things are moving much faster. It's a really exciting time, to be honest. But I have to say, most of these things are still very early on. I'm showing code or some things that are working in code, but most of it is very alpha, I should say. Yeah, what's our objective is to open source the black box of social media. So to, in a way, find the modularity that social groupware is composed of. What is it made of? Posts, likes, assessments, resources, feeds, algorithms, all of that. We want to generalize it, modularize it, and make it, yeah, so that communities can choose what they want to have in their social applications. I'm gonna follow it here too. Yeah, so how does this actually look like? Surprise, surprise, for now it looks like a Discord clone. Uh, yeah, I mean, that's for various reasons. One, it's an accessible format. A lot of people know how it looks, how it feels, how it works. And also because we're building on top of which is a holochain application that looks in a similar way. We'll be building on top of that. So that's the reason we're going with this paradigm for now. This is not the only way people could use Neighbourhoods, but it is the easiest for now. Yeah, next slide. So what do we mean by groupware? We mean a bunch of applets, modular software that communities can install on their groups. This could be things like a chat applet, maybe even a feed applet, a game, a shared calendar, and whatever our community of developers see as useful applets. The idea is that communities can have multiple applets, coordinate in different ways on their own terms. Yeah, this is some mockups that we've been working on. Some of these are implemented, some of these are not implemented. This is an example of a music applet. Here you will have songs as resources. And people would be using assessments, in this case these 3 emojis, to categorize them in playlists in a collective way. Next one. This is a to-do applet. Here you have tasks as resources, and then you have these eyes to fire emojis to categorize how crucial a task is, and then collectively we can see what is the most pressing issue we should tackle. So yeah, we're part of my push is that this is like customizable. Themability is really like a first-class thought. We want this to be as personalizationable allies as possible. You get what I mean? Uh, yeah, so please just show a few of these, just a few themes. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Hopefully we'll get there. We're two. We're two in the design, in the front end design team. Yeah. The reasoning behind what? Yeah. So we're designing with sort of having how to say, programmatically approach in mind. So we don't want to prescribe how things should look. We want to offer the tools so that things look however you want them to look. That's the objective. We, in neighborhoods, we say very often we want to create generic tools so that specific cultures can emerge. So how can we create the most basic functionality that is modularized and small so that people can attach their own culture to it? That has different levels of expression, right? Visual aesthetic is just one way of expressing your culture. So yeah, that's the reasoning behind modularize everything. Everything is a variable. You can change whatever you want. That's the idea behind. Yeah, so until now, we've seen this paradigm. We have these contexts and we have these resources. I'm sharing you a bit of how we are thinking of these modules. So in the music context, you had songs as the resource. In the feed context, you had posts. In the to-do, you have tasks. But we can also think of things as a poll. Could be a context where options are the resource. You can start to see how things that we generally associate with decision making can be also understood within the framework of sense making. Yeah, and how do we do this sense making? We use assessments. We're focusing on assessments right now. Assessments are things we encounter all the time in social media, things like likes, claps, upvotes and downvotes, emoji reactions, ratings, all these kinds of small gestures that we use emojis with very often. Those are assessments. We're focusing on them for now as a sense-making operation. So communities can choose what assessments they want to see on their resources. Next slide, please. We've come up with categorizing quite a few of them and the usual UI UX patterns they follow. These are just a few that you probably have encountered often. They have different ways of interacting with it. You know, like a like, it's a singular one, you either like it or not. Multiple, so you can click it multiple times. Dual, you can choose one or two. A range, you can choose in a sliding scale. Or a group, you can choose one of many. And a rating, you can give like 1 to 5 in this case with stars. These are just like the very common versions of them. Can we do next slide? But of course, communities will be able to choose whatever icon they want. If they want an emoji or an image or whatever they want to become an assessment in their system so that they can yeah, create their own way of relating to the resources they are sharing in a way that you can collectively define how things are made visible. What do we value the most? What do we want to see the most of? And how do we create that culture within our social groups? Next one. So yeah, this is just previews of how this could look and they can be as esoteric as you want. And the idea is to, go to the next one. That communities can create custom algorithms to affect to sort of like take the data from the collective assessments and define how this is applied to the visibility of resources. We want this to be as accessible as possible, to really be as low code or even no code if possible, with tools like this, right? Like you can you go to the next slide? No, yeah. So the most likes in the last 5 days, we can arrange a feed that way, right? So the things that have the most likes in the last 5 days go to the top, the community sees them first, we all share this algorithm. This algorithm is open for everyone to see how it works. And for us to collectively decide on the scoring of our resources. I wanted to go through a few of these so that it's like more or less clear how they work. So for example, if we have like as an assessment, we define likability as a dimension. So you are positioning resources on the dimension of likability through likes. A very easy method would be where we just want to see the most likes at the top. So in this case, the number of likes corresponds to the score of each post. So if something has 20 likes, the score of that post is 20, right? This is a super simple algorithm, but very soon, very easily, you can get much more complex things. If you go to the next one. So for example, here we have 2 assessments, singular assessments, a heart and a flag. Yeah, a red flag. And we have 2 operations for this method. We have the dimension. In this case, it's a dimension of freshness. So we are assessing things so that the freshest things go to the top. In this case, dividing likes between hours since post. So you already get that, something with 13 likes, posted only 1 hour ago would have a score of 13, while something with 20 likes posted 2 hours ago would have a score of 10. And very easily you can see how you can get a much more complex feed algorithm with a very simple operation. And here we're also using a threshold to define that things that have more than 5 flags are obscured, maybe removed from the feed, maybe blurred out, or some other light moderation tool. So we can also see how this assessment framework can help communities to do collective curation and soft moderation of their feeds, just with this simple operation. Other interesting things you can do if you would have, for example, an upvote, downvote pair. You could have 2 different dimensions that come from the same assessments. So if you subtract the positive to the negative, you get a sort of sentiment score. So for example, 100 likes, 101 dislikes, you get a sentiment of -1. But you could also have a dimension of engagement. How much have people engaged with this post, regardless of their assessment is positive or negative? Go to the next one. And you can see how, the value is completely different, right? So you could have 2 different contexts, 2 different feeds where you see each one, or you can combine them into one context where you have a combination of both, or whatever, your community feels like doing. And this is what we call the SenseMaker dashboard. This is what communities can see all of their assessments being done in their groups. How are users, members of a neighborhood, assessing a specific resource? What have they used? When? Sort of like making it transparent for the community to see how the algorithms are working and what other members are assessing. I'm sure you are all having like super exciting ideas. These are very simple examples. And I'm looking forward to hear what you have in mind with this. Also, this is, I'm showing like very simple math operations also because this is what we can actually do right now. We can only do very simple math operations, but this is already code that is working. If you are holochain savvy at least, which not many people are. But if you do, then please, please, please talk to me. Yeah. So you can see how we conceptualize sense making as a paradigm of social coordination, doing resource assessment, doing collective content curation, having light moderation tools, and some casual decision making. Not super blockchain hardcore, but more casual stuff. Yeah, the next thing I want to talk about is not at all ready, but I'm bringing it up because it's in the pipeline and it's relevant to the coordination topic. It's the concept of badges. Yeah, badges are modifiers upon members that signal, I don't know, if we want to acknowledge someone's expertise, if we want to acknowledge someone's exemplary behavior, we can emit a badge. Badges can be given manually by moderators or admins or community activators. For example, you could have an expert badge that has a modifier on your assessments. So as an expert, when you're assessing in this context, your likes are valued at 1/4 more than most, right? 25% extra on your scoring capacity. So that's one way of acknowledging someone's expertise and bringing that into a specific actionable effect on the visibility of resources. This can get super crazy, of course. So you could have a pipeline of creating what we consider appreciated post, for example. So something that has positive sentiment larger than 10, we consider that an appreciated post by the community. And if you've had 5 of those in the last 1 month, that means you're appreciated contributor, right? So you could have pipelines to create badges, either manually or automatically, to convey, create like a group-centric reputation system where we acknowledge others in our community. Yeah, so all of these affordances, more than anything, come from building on top of Holochain, which I will not go super deep into because we have people who are possibly better than me at doing that. But what I want to say is that building on Holochain allows us to have cryptographically secured on-chain social data, not on a global blockchain, but on a local source chain for each community. What does this mean, or what we find really important about this in neighborhoods is that we are building the social computational fabric that we are operating on, right? These are distributed apps. We are running our community. Our devices are holding our data. Our devices are performing the computation on our assessments and our community interactions. We find this super important, super necessary, that you as a community are in control of your own social data. This also means, because we're building on Holochain, that there's no global consensus. So there's no single monolithic vision of what is the truth. That means it is a contingent reality, socially produced in a local context. It allows it to be scalable much more easily than on blockchains, but it also brings it challenges, right? One of the main challenges is, if you have no global consensus, then how do you do sense making across communities? Until now, we've only seen operations of how to do sense making internally, like within a single community. But how would we do this across communities? So for that, we are proposing the sense maker. The sense maker is a shared data schema for social metadata. So what does that mean? It means that each group, each neighborhoods, has a sense maker inside of their group. It's a Holochain DNA with a specific pattern of how to record the social data. So the data that comes from assessments in this case, right? You put this in a specific place in your code, and then because each neighborhood has the same structure for their social data, you can start to do operations between them. Next slide. Yeah, so you don't have to do like analyze the data of all the activity in the group. You only need to analyze the data within the SenseMaker, and we are also gonna provide like specific operations that you can do on this data. So there will be like a API that groups can, or coders can implement for specific sense-making operations. What does this mean? Yeah, good question. We're trying to figure it out, but we have a few ideas. Yeah, please continue. Like a what? Yeah. Yeah. It's prime time for those kinds of operations, yeah. Yeah. So, for example, one very specific thing that you can do with the SenseMaker is to reinterpret the assessment that a community is using. So, for example, let's say we have an urban farming community that is using a range to assess the posts, and we want to bring that to a local coast agricultural group that uses a 3 emoji reaction system. The local coast agriculture can import the resources from another community into their posts because they find them relevant. They want to also see what these people are talking about. They've agreed that they want to share this data, and they want to translate the way in which the culture from one group translates to the other. So they define a threshold, right? Like, okay, if your posts are from 0 to 0.33, it's one emoji. In the middle, it's another emoji. If it's high up, it's another emoji. This is a very, very simple example. But what I want you to get from this is that communities can choose how to interpret the social data of other communities. It is up to each community to recontextualize what the other community is bringing in. Next slide, please. And you can do this across communities, right? You can bring data from other communities. Communities decide what they want to expose, what they want to make available for communities to be able to import, and you can decide to bridge across communities. You build this bridge. We're thinking of having some standards for assessments, so it would be easier if we are using the same algorithm for likes for a feed, then it's super straightforward to import those. But if not, that's totally fine. We can create a custom bridge between communities so that they decide how to interpret other communities' data. Next, please. Yeah, and we can of course do this with badges as well, right? Like this is a super straightforward example. So if you have a surf community and someone has a surfer instructor badge there, you can assume that person is maybe a local in the area, so you can give them a local badge in your community. If you have an expert in urban farming, maybe in the agriculture group, that's just a home grower badge. And maybe that badge only allows you access to certain places in that community, or gives you a modifier on certain posts, or whatever you can think about. But this is how we're thinking of doing sense making in a context of no global consensus, right? How do we bridge social data in a way that's contingent to the reality of each group? So yeah, where are we now? We have an alpha coming in a few months with a version 0.00001 of the launcher, the wizard, and the dashboard. We have a light version of the SenseMaker, so you can do already some social operations, like some social data operations, like the divide, multiply, larger than, some basic stuff. We will have customizable assessments for resources, and we will have a couple of applets ready, the chat and the feed, which will be very modular and will serve as templates for other applets to be built. Yeah, and after that, in the not so distant future, we'll start releasing the Bazaar, which is this marketplace with a social fabric. We want to start onboarding pilot communities, linking them with developers. developing open source modules that can be part of the library of applets that any community can utilize. Yeah, next slide, please. So this is more general, just my thoughts, not necessarily Neighborhoods' thoughts on how I see a Web3 coordination stack forming. So I personally believe that we should be using peer-to-peer apps for the social part. So everything that we're doing in Google Docs, Discord, Telegram, we should be doing on peer-to-peer, open source, cryptographically secured infrastructure. I think this layer should be local, agent-centric, aim for eventual consistency, and where we don't have universal view of data, right? And as you go further up, you have more formalizing structures that rely on blockchains. So I would like to see DAO tools for these apps. Not only Neighborhoods, there's plenty of tools building in this space, and I think we should aim to get these bridges going, because then you can also interoperate through them, right, between peer-to-peer applications. So DAO tools, NFTs, formal decision-making, tokenomics, and then on top of that, yeah, sometimes we have to move money around in the entire world. Cool, we can use blockchains and global consensus for that. Yeah, but on the bottom you have like high trust communities. On the top you have trustless infrastructure. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. Next one, please. Yeah, please. Use the mic, use the mic.
On the governance day, we'll be demoing kind of a soft DAO tool set for helping like generate things. So that's that middle layer with some of the DAO tools and that kind of stuff that's built on Holochain.
Yeah, really, really looking forward for those Holochain demos. I was scared to death to do one myself, so yeah, happy heart is here. Yeah, so what I'm thinking for specific ways in which we can start bridging Neighborhoods to this broader ecosystem. Yeah, I would like to see DAO tools for Neighborhoods, that it would be easy to spin up a multi-sig and start doing DAO things. I've been thinking about this, and I'm not super sure. These are like open questions that I would like to talk with all of you about. What about exporting social graphs and trust graphs and using something like the Lens protocol, or I don't know, or doing data commons, like what you were referring to, Scott. Exporting that from the local source chain and using it in some other ways. Having a broader sort of co-fi, refi economic modules that are pluggable by Neighborhoods. We've talked about this a couple of times in this place, about building a Cosmos Holochain interface layer. How could that look? How could we bridge the two worlds? Maybe how we could turn badges into NFTs. I don't know, maybe soulbounds or something like that, and then plug into all of that ecosystem of NFT tools. Yeah, so where to find more and connect? You can join yet another Discord, yay. Woo! Yeah. You can also check out our white paper with some very recent updates. You can also check our recent demo for the Holochain ecosystem session. It was posted a week ago, I think, and it's showing what will be available in the alpha in a couple of months. And this is a personal wish of mine. I am interested in talking with people who are doing user experience for distributed systems. How does it look to do good user experience in patterns of eventual consistency, in decentralized applications? Yeah, how does that look? How can we make this usable, friendly, and amazing to use? Yeah, you can also send us an email. I'll be sharing some of these in the Telegram. And yeah, that's kind of it. Thank you.
Yeah, we have 20 minutes for questions. Just want to do a organizers slash topic day question. What are your thoughts on coordinations? How you see neighborhoods in the context of coordinations? And yeah.
Yeah.
that's the question.
So, yeah, my wish in terms of coordinations for neighborhoods is that it can act as a form of implementation of this principle of subsidiarity. I don't know if you've heard of that principle. Yeah, sort of like that issues are dealt with the most local context that they are affecting. I think Holochain in general and neighborhoods in particular can enable groups to really keep their agency local and scale up as needed. So how can collectivity and social coordination emerge from bottom up? Yep.
Hello. Hello. Okay. So when can we start using the neighborhoods application? And is it necessary to have any relayer server, or how does this locally produced data get to the other users of the neighborhood?
Yeah, so I guess you're asking about like packaging the app in a friendly way. There is efforts in doing that in Holochain. At the moment, neighborhoods, you would need to be a bit tech savvy to get it running. I assume for the alpha, it will be easier for people who can use a bit of the command line to get it going, but as in like general public, I would say maybe 6 months at least, maybe more. And I also want to be like super, I don't know, I don't want to waste community's time. Like yeah, you're tech savvy, you can start using it sooner. But for this to be usable by communities doing critical stuff, I would say a bit longer, probably a year. Yeah. The packaging?
If it's necessary to have a relayer server that is
No.
so just the peers, as they are connected to the network, they will be relaying the information to the other peers.
Yeah, that's correct. That's more of a holochain affordance, not a neighborhoods one, but yeah, that's correct.
But if I understand correctly, the idea in Holochain is also to have some nodes that are going to be kept online, so that if people are not connected, then there can be information passed on.
Are you referring to the
Holochain.
Not the Holo
Well, I
hosting
don't
service.
know.
Yeah, I mean, of course, people who are online longer can transfer information, act as a witness, and just like relay information. But yeah, maybe Art can give you a thorough answer.
Try not to stand right in front of the speaker and get feedback. Yeah, so you don't need a server, you don't need any kind of special relay. When you write things to your local state, you then publish them to the DHT, and other nodes split up the work of sharing those things. So you don't have to be online for your data to be discoverable, but you had to be online at some point to publish it to others.
Yeah, a little question on top of this. What are the requirements what will be the requirements at the user level? They will have to, hey, download another app, or just go to your regular browser and interact with Neighborhood?
Yeah, that's a good question. In the immediate future, download an app, for sure. Download the launcher and install applets within the launcher. But at some point, hopefully, when the Holo hosting service is provided, you could do so within a browser, for sure. But I don't have a timeline for that. Maybe someone does.
And the second question is, do you already have some monetization model? Do you plan to?
Yeah, so at the moment, what we're thinking is that we will be mediating in the bazaar, basically. So everything will be open source, but the bazaar is the place where we will be monetizing small transaction fees for how connecting applet developers and communities, facilitating that through an currency, like an ERC20 token that we have. But that's still, I don't know, like it's still up to see. It's not a business model that I love. I would like to see something where we just like create a game and then we play it too. So sort of like be participants in the bazaar as anyone else would be. and get paid to develop modules for the ecosystem. That's personally what I would like to see, but that's not up for me.
I would like to share some ideas, but maybe...
That would be great. I would love that.
I have a question about the badges. How are they earned or taken away or verified?
Yeah, that's a good question. Still, it's like a huge design space, right? But we're thinking right now of having them either manually allocated by admins or moderators, or having them have a automated pipeline to give them to people. How are they revocated? They could have rules for revocation. So some of them, for example, the one I showed where it was the most appreciated post in the last 5 months or something, I don't remember. If you don't hold that in the next month, you lose that badge, right? And with that, you lose the sort of like whatever it afforded you to do. So there's, again, automated revocancy of the badges, and there's also, I assume, manual one, but that's up to each neighborhood to decide. We will be hopefully providing tools to make that easily customizable.
Do you have a relationship with Hilo? And I'm curious about the interaction there, just given like the history of the social network on Holochain.
Yeah, I mean, we are aware with Hilo, and there's connections within the team, but not really at a term of in terms of doing any interoperability or talking about integrating them, or not really at that level. But we like them quite a lot.
A couple of questions. First one about the per neighborhood sense maker. Are they an individual within that community? I.e., they hold the responsibilities. So if that's the case, will you need some mechanisms to deal with corruptibility of that individual?
Yeah, the sense maker is not an individual. It's a piece of code inside each group. Should I repeat? Okay. The sense maker is a piece of code within each group. So it's a holochain DNA within each group, or even each applet. We're kind of figuring that out. And the idea is that it's just a data schema to have your social data in a specific format, and some operations that you can perform upon that social schema, basically. So it is not an individual, and how things get decided, which is the question of corruptibility. At the moment, we have this figure of the community activator. So the community activator is the person who starts a neighborhood and sets it up and starts inviting people and holds some moderation and administration power. We have a pipeline. I'm pushing for this pipeline of progressive decentralization of the community activator figure, so it can become sort of a collective thing. We don't know exactly how this will look, but at the moment, there is the possibility of the community activator just, going rogue, for sure.
Okay, second question was, sense making looks like it'll be most useful when you have a lot of resources to analyze. Are you interested in bootstrapping by importing Web 2 resources?
Good question. Yeah, we're considering it. We're definitely considering it. There's no definite answer on that, but could be an option for sure. And it is true that the most interesting sense-making operations happen when you have a lot of data. But even for the to-do applet that we've been using, it's already super nice, right? Like, you as a team can be like, hey, what do we have to do? Let's assess this, and you can just see things float to the top. Even if it's a group of 6 people, you can already start to see some useful sense-making.
So first, I put a serious hat on and make a short comment. This relates to the bazaar. More like how fucking close I have to put this. So, okay, the serious hat and comment on relating to the bazaar. In terms of you being just a member in the bazaar, is actually something very worthwhile to look at. Like when I was doing more serious work on a wacky metaverse economy. This was one thing I gathered some soft data. There was no direct, like, here's a case where it works, but there was a lot of soft data that points out that this is actually rather powerful. Many platforms are somewhat afraid of doing it. They want to be higher up. But when you saw somebody going towards that direction, it almost seemed to be a positive. So that's the serious hat. Then the Chester hat comes in, and I throw you a question that I try to make hard. So the question being, now, there is an interesting possibility in the structures that you're talking about of, let's say, like this nesting of communities. Like community becomes like a cluster community, then becomes even higher level of community. Have you thought about the structuring of those, and what would be, say, patterns of interactions between 5 communities, and how would they differ? Like, what would be the, let's say, the design palette or models of such kind of super communities or super communities?
Yeah, great question. I think, yeah, this is something we are still trying to figure out, and it mostly, I think, depends on where you draw the membrane of the communities, like what is constituted as a community. Because if you go even, you atomize it a bit lower down, you could even have communities where you're only part of the applets you install. So you might be part of a community where there's a million things people are, I don't know, there's a marketplace, people are selling and buying things, people have, I don't know, they're chatting about certain topics you don't care about. You might not even install those applets and just go there to play chess, let's say. And then you might only be coordinating with those people in terms of your chess playing. And then you could be sort of like playing chess across communities. You could be playing chess with another community as well, be on their leaderboard. Let's say they're sharing their assessments on the players in their chess communities. So if you do that, then you even have like this more fragmented approach, where it's not so much as a nesting, I would say, as much as it is like a networking of communities. But there is also the potential of having these more nested features. Let's say, for example, there's a horror film community and there's a comedy film community that they're really into their own niches. But then there's just like people who like watching films every now and then, and they could bring from those niche communities their top movies of the month, right? Just that context. Maybe those niche communities are doing many other things, sense-making, entire catalogs of movies. You just want a bit of that. And you can have sort of like a federated film appreciation community that brings stuff from other niche communities. That feels more like a nesting. So I would personally hope that there's the possibility of using both patterns, like a nesting and a network and whatever is in between. But that's a huge challenge, and I can already see the developers like, being
like the
mad
one
at
thing
me.
to look at, this is a short comment, I promise, is look at the different paradigms. Like, for example, games have an enter-exit paradigm, which is often lighter, and treating a super community kind of more like a game, that we go here and then we go out, might be useful as a pattern.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just want, not exactly a question, more like an answer to him and also to something he said. He just basically already said it, but in the sense maker and in the way to stack assessments and relationships between communities, you already have basically a pretty affordance-rich environment to stack communities, if you will, by making sure the inputs and outputs of the different communities have some kind of relationship to each other. So you don't really need to identify this as a super or a sub-community, but rather, here is what we share into that community, here's what we take from them, and how do these things go through a transformation process between them. And then the other thing is also, you can fork communities, right? So you don't need to assure that a community activator cannot possibly corrupt a community, because you have all the data locally between all the members, meaning that if somebody goes rogue, you just fork the community and you have somebody else be the community activator for that, with all the history of the community still intact. So you don't need to do the sort of hardcore, let's make sure nobody can affect anything kind of thing.
Totally. Thank you for that.
Could I maybe, we spoke a little bit about this earlier, but I would say there's this, yeah, there's another question there. There's a little snake underlying this, like sense making and the kind of the data thing. Like if you don't have a strong, let's say, some type system, this is a problem also in like climate modeling, let's say, like so cloud cover maybe is done like on a daily basis, but then some soil stuff is done on a yearly basis, and we don't really know how to like unify these things. So while it seems in this example where you had just a number and you convert it into 3 values, and then you convert the 3 values back into a number, okay, this works. But if you start building up higher and higher, at some point you're going to run into these same problems. And there's a different form of consensus needed there, which is like how do you model or how do you express this data? And this went like really, got really screwed up in like the semantic web. You see that kind of doesn't work. Yeah. Yeah, and I would say like it's a golden opportunity to actually think a little bit about the type system before you start sort of allowing all kinds of data. It's like very, yeah, you'd want to do that, but you're gonna run into problems trying to unify this. So maybe first need to think a little bit like some type system where you have units and ways to form bigger types out of smaller types and stuff like this. So it remains sensible at like a, yeah. It's just a warning, but I will
Yeah, no, great. I don't have like the technical knowledge to assess if that's the case, but I can put you in contact with our developers.
Actual last question, I think. So one of the core concepts in the coordination framework is this idea of interweaving, of sort of communities being like creating interdependence between them. One of the things that you have spoken about is, of course, how do they communicate with one another? But is there anything in mind for, like, one of the phrases that you'll probably hear Primavera say later is, like, how do you get, like, communities need to share blood with one another? That's almost like you're engaging in the process of becoming one. My thinking, or the thing that I think that we've most thought about and how that looks through distributed systems is, like, sharing of assets in some way or form. Is that something in the protocol that you guys are doing? These groups? We're going to talk about coordinations later? Woo. Is that what you mean? At 11:30 here, so don't miss it. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think this sharing of assets could happen at 2 places. So one of them is this sense making of the resources, right? If one community shares a resource and another community feeds off that resource and its social data, then you have a notion of shared assets at the layer of communication, right? But on top of that, if we go to like sort of like more formalized tools, I could see modules for mutual staking, for example, so that communities who are monetizing their efforts in any way could start sharing some of the risk together, for example. Or many other more economic modules of asset sharing. But at the level of neighborhoods, I think it's more on the social data and digital resource side. Yeah.
So I guess the question is like how you build the, was it the second level stack on top of neighborhoods is the...
Yeah. I'm hoping that very soon we will see like a whole set of economic tools built on top of Holochain around mutual credit and local currencies and some of that things. So I'm hoping that's kind of like the first economic layer, and then you can go to sort of like a blockchain layer on top of that if needed. But hopefully we will see more local solutions that just rely on peer-to-peer infrastructure.
Yeah. Thank you, Pablo. Thank you. Thank you, Neighbourhoods and Holochain, for sponsoring this event.